Welcome to Flipped Classroom. We're looking at lists and dictionaries in Python. Our learning intention is we are learning about how to manipulate lists and dictionaries in Python. And our success criteria is I can create lists and dictionaries, I can access elements of lists and dictionaries, and I can append and remove elements from lists and dictionaries. So we've already had a quick look at one type of list when we were looking at strings. Lists are a type of variable that can contain the same type of data. So this can be really useful if you've got a dictionary or a list of elements such as characters in a game or positions. So strings are just a type of list specifically to do with characters, but we will be looking at a couple of other types of lists as well. So creating a list is quite easy. All you've got to do is write the elements that you want inside square brackets and then assign that to a variable. So let's look at slicing up lists. Because strings are lists, we can use the same notation that we learnt for strings in lists. So if I have a list with a number colon number in my indexes, this will allow me to access the elements from the starting position to the ending position minus 1. And that's the same with all of the other elements as well. So if I have my list with just a start and a colon, it goes for all the elements in that list from the position that I've asked for to the end of that list. If I do the list with the colon end, it will get all the elements from the very start to that number minus 1. If I do just the list with the colon in the index field, it will copy that whole list. So let's go over to PyCharm and have a look at how that's done. Here's my program on lists. You can see in the first line we have our variable squares and we have the list 1, 4, 9, 16 and 25 being created there. The next line we print out those squares. And the final line is where we want to put our code, and it's asking us to just print out the numbers 4, 9, and 16 from that list. Now 4 is in the second position, 16 is in the fourth, but remember with lists we need to subtract 1 because the first position is actually the 0th position when indexing. So we will type in here the squares, then we will open up our indexing, and we will go from 1 through to 3 because we want position 1 here, 2 and 3, and that will output it. Now we'll press play and check that our answer is what we wanted. Now you can see that it's got 4 and 9 there. We didn't quite get enough, so let's go to 1 to 4 because it is to the end minus 1, and there's our answer. So you have to remember that when we're looking at this type of splicing, the first number is where it starts, the last number is where it cuts it off. So it's cutting it off here at the 25th. Let's go back to our notes. Sometimes we want to change the elements that currently exist in a list. Sometimes we want to add elements, other times we want to remove elements, and sometimes we just want to change some of the elements that are in that list. So we can add elements to the end of a list in two different ways. One is we can use the append method, and that's where I put the list.append, and then in brackets I put what's the new element I want to add. We can also use the plus equals assignment. So if I have a list and I plus equals and then I put in square brackets the items that I want to add, it'll add those items to the end of that list. Now, if I want to just change an item in that list, what I can do is I can index the item that I want to change, and then I put in that new value. So I have the list, I then open up a square bracket and put the number of the element that I want to change, and then I put in the equals and the new element value, and it'll save that into there. Let's go over to PyCharm and see how this works. So here we are looking at operations. Now we can see our first line here. We have our list called animals. That's stored in that variable. It's got those animals there. And it'll print it out in this second line. In this fourth line, we're using this plus minus assign to be able to add these two items to the end of the list. And that'll print it out. So we should see the list of these animals and then we should see these two added on to the end at this second print. Now the third print, it's saying animals.append, and we're adding on that dino to append to the list, and we're going to print that out. Now we want to replace the word dino with dinosaur. Now to do this, we need to use our indexes to work it out. Now we need to work out what position this dino is going to be in. Now elephant's going to be in position 0, 1, 2, 3 for the giraffe, 4, 5 for dog. So our dino will be in the 6th position, remembering that lists start at 0. So let's remove this and let's go animals, because that's our variable, and we want the 6th position as we worked out, and we're going to make that equal dinosaur, and then we're going to print that out. Let's have a look at how this runs, and we can see that that first print printed out the first 4 animals. Then this second print here added on the monkey and dog, but it's still got those first 4 animals. Our third print here, we appended dino to the list, and you can see that down here. And our fourth one, we replaced that position with the word dinosaur, and it printed out that one. So we can see that that's working fine. We will check it, and it's come back with OK. So let's go back to our notes and look at list items. Sometimes we want to remove those things that we've put in there. One way we can do this is we can do slicing and inserting. So we can change multiple elements out and put in a new value for those elements. So in this example, I've got list 1 to 3, and then I've put in a square bracket the new value. So what that does is it removes the elements 1 and 2, and then before the element 3, it puts in that new value. So our list will be a little bit shorter. Now, if I put an array there of multiple values, it'd put all of those values into that position. If we just want to remove an element or remove multiple elements, we can do this similarly by just putting in a null list. And a null list is an empty list with nothing in there. And what this does is it removes elements 1 and 2 from the list. Now we can do that to the whole list as well. If we want to just clean the list out, we can just make it the empty list or the null list. Let's go over to PyCharm now and see how this works. So here we have our lists again. Now we can do a couple of changes to lists. So here's our animals. That's our variable, and it's listing all these animals. And line 2 says to print out that list. Now line 4, we want from 1 to 3 to be replaced with the word cat. And then we're going to print that out. And we'll see what happens with that. Then we want 1 and 3 to be replaced with the null list, which will remove those 2 items. And we'll see that when we print that out. And finally, we want to clear the list, because that's what the challenge is for this one. So we're going to clear this list. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that the variable animals is equal to the empty list. And then we're going to print that out. So let's have a look at how this works. So the first one, you can see this first line here from this print on line 2 has printed off all those animals. Next, we wanted to replace 1 to 3 with cat. Now it's replaced both lion and tiger with cat, but because we've told it to do it across 2 positions, it's removed both of those and inserted the cat into that position. Finally, we wanted to get rid of 1 to 3, so it removed the cat and the next one, which was giraffe, and we're left with only 3 elements left. And then finally, we said to make it an empty list, so that's printed off that empty list. Now, the animals variable is still defined here, it's just empty, which is different to being undefined. So let's do our check, and it's come back all correct, and we can move on. Let's go back to our note and look at tuples. Now let's look at tuples. Tuples are the same as a list, but they can't be changed once they're created. So we can create a tuple by using circular brackets. So you can see here I have a tuple, and it's got 3 elements in it. One's called first, one's called second, one's called third. Okay, let's go over to PyCharm now and see how tuples work. Here we have our code for the tuples. As you can see, we have the alphabet variable is set up here, and we've got the list of the alphabet. Now we need to scroll sideways a bit to see that whole list. Now tuples are very similar to lists. They have many of the same methods. So to get the length of the alphabet, we just need to type in the len, and then we just open up and type alphabet, and that will tell us the length of the alphabet. So now if we run this, we can see that there's 26 elements in that variable alphabet. Now we can check our answers and move on to dictionaries. Let's have a look at our notes on dictionaries. Dictionaries are a special type of list where we have a key for that value. And this can be useful because we don't have to remember the index, we just have to remember which key it is. Now we can create a dictionary by using the squiggly brackets, and we do that in the following method. So I have my dictionary, and I am assigning where key 1 is equal to value 1, key 2 has value 2, and key 3 is value 3. If I want to add to the dictionary, I can use this syntax. And this syntax shows that if I've got a key that doesn't exist currently in that dictionary, it will create it and then add that value on as for access through that key. Now I can access values in this. Instead of finding out which position it is in that list, I just write which key it is. So in the following example, it's got print dictionary key 2. So it will return whatever value 2 is and print that out. Now if the key doesn't exist, Python will throw an error. And this could be caused by having upper or lowercase characters where the key does not. Let's go over to PyCharm and see how this works. Here's our code on dictionaries. Now you can see in this first line here we have a comment, so nothing will happen. But our second line here, we create a variable called phonebook, and we have 3 elements in there. Now each element has its own key, so we have John with the numbers 1, 2, 3, Jane with 2, 3, 4, and Gerard with 3, 4, 5. Now line 3 will print that out for us. Now line 6, we're adding in a new element. Because there is no element called Jill in our original phone book, it creates a new one and gives it the number 3, 4, 5. And we should be able to print that out and see what happens. Next, we're going to delete an element, and we can use this command here, del, and we're going to say delete from the variable phonebook the element called John. And next, I want to print out Jane's phone number. So to print off Jane's phone number, I access it the same way as I would an index. So I will type in my variable, and then I open up my square brackets, and I type in the key that I'm looking for. Now I wanted Jane's phone number, so I'm going to look for Jane. Now when I run this, let's see what happens. So line 3 was to print the phone book, and you can see those 3 names are there with their corresponding values. Next, we added Jill, and then we said to print that off as well. And again, we've got the list there, and you can see Jill was added to the end with her number. Next, it deleted John, but we didn't have any code to print that out. Finally, we wanted to print off Jane's number, which Jane was 2, 3, 4, and that's what's printed. Let's check our answers. And now we can move on with looking at the keys and values a little further. Let's go back to our notes to see about that. Now, dictionaries are like lists, but they have some special methods for themselves. And these methods help us to find out what information is stored in that dictionary. Now, the first method we're going to look at is the keys method. Now, this will list out the keys that are in a dictionary, and it can be useful if you want to check if a key exists before trying to recall it. The second method we're going to look at is the values method. And this one, like the keys method, just lists out all the values that are in a dictionary. And these will be ordered in the way that the dictionary was created. It won't be in ascending or descending order. It'll just be the values that you have. Let's go over to PyCharm and see how these methods work. So let's have a look at the keys and values of this dictionary. Again, we've got the phone book and we've got our names and numbers up the top again, and it'll print that off so we know what's in there. Again, we're going to add Jill into there, and then we're going to print off that phone book. Now line 8 is going to print off the phone book's keys. And finally, down here, we want to print off the phone book's values. So we can do this. Now, because phone book is our variable, I'm just going to leave that there, and I'm going to type in .values to get the method. Now, the good part is I can start typing it and then press tab or enter, and it will fill it out for me. Now, let's see how this goes. So our phone book, when we started off, had 3 names and numbers, and we can see that because it's printed it out. The next, we added Jill and asked it to print it, and it did that as well, and you can see Jill's added onto the end. Next, we asked it to print the keys. So it's told me, here's the dictionary keys, which is John, Jane, Gerard, and Jill. And then we asked it to print the values. So it's told us, here's the dictionary values, and it's printed off all those values that we put in there, and they match up with each of those. So we can check our answer, and now we can move on to the in operator. Let's go back to our notes and have a look at that. Now, the in operator is the same for lists and dictionaries as it is for strings. And we have to remember it is case sensitive. So we can use the in operator to search if a value exists in our list. If we use the variable animals and we have a list which has dog, cat, and fish, and we ask it if snake is in that list of animals, it'll print out false because snake does not exist in that list. We can also do this with dictionaries, and it goes through and checks the key for the dictionary. So in this case, I have a dictionary called phone book, and the phone book has John, Jane, and Jared in there, and it will check to see if John is in that phone book, and it will come back as true because John is there. Now, if I used a lowercase j, or if I had the other characters in uppercase, it would print out false because those do not exist in there. Okay, let's go over to PyCharm and see how the in operator works. Let's have a look at the in operator. Now, first line, we have our grocery list, which has fish, tomato, and apples. And we're going to check if the word tomato is in that groceries list. Now, we can see that it is, so it should come back with printing out true. In our dictionary, we have the same 3 items as our keys. So we have the key of fish, tomato, and apples. And against fish, we want 1 of those. Against tomato, we want 6. And against apples, we want 3. So we want to check if the word fish is in our dictionary. So we do it exactly the same way as we do a list. So I'm going to put in fish. So I'm asking, is fish in my grocery dictionary? Now let's run this and see what happens. So we get true and true. So for the first print here, tomato in grocery list, we can see that. Our second true, when we're printing out here, fish in grocery dictionary, and we can see that. Now with the in function, we need to be careful. It is case sensitive. So if I had a capital F there and I reran this, it would come out as false because capital F for fish is different to a lowercase f for fish. And that's something you need to be careful when collecting stuff from a dictionary, that the cases are the same. So we rerun that, we do know it works, we hit check, and it's come back all okay. And we can move on to the next set of lessons. As always, like the video and subscribe for more videos on programming and maths.